What did Pope Leo XIV just say about Jews and Muslims and non-Christians? And did Pope Leo XIV just deny papal supremacy? Believe it or not, these two questions are related because they're based on the same general audience that we're going to review from Pope Leo XIV. But I just have to say, and so it begins. I've already seen Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestants share fake news saying that Pope Leo XIV just denied papal supremacy. I understand why the Eastern Orthodox and Protestants would share that fake news. For the life of me, I've never understood why Catholics are in this mode of self-destruction and share this kind of fake news. but here it is. Let me share my screen if you haven't heard of it already. Okay, so here's an Eastern Orthodox in this particular case saying, imagine how exhausting it must be to be a Pope apologist and spend hundreds of hours defending the claims of Vatican I, just to have your own Pope concede the whole thing. And this guy quotes this headline that says, Pope Leo XIV drops papal supremacy, urging full communion with all Christians. And somehow my name gets brought up in the mix, of course, as usual. All papists spurging right now, Albrecht, Lofton, and so on, all about to crash out with this guy as Pope. No, I know how to deal with fake news, and I don't crash out because somebody posted a headline that isn't true, but it's not my first rodeo. But sure, yeah, I guess I'm constantly on their mind to where they have to bring my name up whenever I'm not even the subject of the discussion. But like I said, I've seen Catholics share this. I've seen now Eastern Orthodox, Protestants, all saying that Pope Leo XIV drops papal supremacy, urging for full communion. And look, this is exactly what I've been telling y'all about for years. It's a combination of not verifying what is said, using a ridiculously bad hermeneutic, and really poor education when it comes to matters of ecclesiology. You combine those together and you get headlines like this. I likened it to moments ago with someone offline. I just was joking with them and I said, Pope says something nice, the media, and here I'm talking about within the church, outside the church, the media then says, Pope abandons Jesus's practice of whipping people in the temple. Pope says that Jesus was wrong. And they'll say something stupid like that, all based on the Pope saying something nice. Now, obviously, that doesn't logically follow from the Pope saying something nice, but in their mind, if he says something nice, that's somehow at odds with Jesus saying or doing something that wasn't nice. And so he must be denying that. It's pretty entertaining. I mean, you got to admit, it is kind of comical. But this is what has been going on for decades now, especially under Pope Francis with all the fake news, as I've documented for years now. Already it started up again with Pope Leo XIV. Get ready. Great Wall says, Michael can't catch a break. I can't. The fake news industry is just, it's still going, right? And I told y'all it would. I told y'all, I said the conditions. I literally was telling y'all that 2 hours ago in the previous video. I said the conditions that enables this are still there. So it will continue under this pontificate. And here we are like 2 or 3 hours later. If y'all didn't see that video, go and watch it. That was me where I covered Pope Leo XIV 2 years ago when he was Cardinal Provost, saying some really interesting things. He, first of all, calls out the bishops and online personalities, Catholic personalities, who disseminated fake news, who were critics of Pope Francis. He calls it all of them out and rebukes them, which is ironic because those are the same guys right now who love Pope Leo XIV. And yet Pope Leo XIV 2 years ago was calling them all out. And then he also, in the same video, is promoting Cardinal Bernardine and Supich's seamless garment view. And we cover what all that means and the implications of that. And go and watch that video if you haven't already. It was just done a few hours ago. I'll put a link to it in the show description. But yeah, this one is just... it brings a smile to my face. If you're having a bad day, read this, okay? Read this from an Eastern Orthodox online apologist saying, Pope Leo XIV drops papal supremacy, and it must be exhausting for papal apologists to spend hundreds of hours defending Vatican I to have your Pope concede it, and he shares a fake news headline. Okay, but where do they get this from, right? They got to get it from somewhere. You got to... Fake news is rooted in something, usually. Sometimes I've actually seen them make up stuff out of nowhere, but that's rare. Usually they will take something that was said and just run like 5 miles with it, right? So Pope says something nice, ergo, Pope condemns Jesus for saying something not so nice when he's whipping people in the temple. Like that logically follows for them. Okay, but it's rooted in something, right? What is it rooted in? Well, he did have a papal audience yesterday with representatives of other churches, ecclesial communities, and other religions. And he talks about the question of ecumenism, and he talks about Jews and Muslims and interreligious dialogue. So that's what they're rooting this in. But we're going to read through the audience as we always do. We're going to read through the transcript. And you tell me if he's denying papal supremacy, if there's anything entailed in denial, you know. Let me put it to you like this. You remember, so Vatican II explicitly asserts papal supremacy. Lumen Gentium, for example. In the same document, it calls for full communion with all Christians, right? In the same document. And the same council even then has another document calling for full communion with all Christians. But at the same time, it promotes explicitly papal supremacy. Are those two things mutually exclusive? Is it possible to call for full unity with all Christians and hold the papal supremacy at the same time? Is that possible, or are they just diametrically opposed? There's just no way to reconcile that. Okay, if you're using a hermeneutic of rupture, you'll look for some way to say, those are just incompatible. And what you'll do is you'll try to say, if you're calling for full communion, that must mean that you no longer expect people to hold the papal supremacy. Ergo, he's denying papal supremacy. Or you can look at the same data and say, call for full communion and an affirmation of papal supremacy. If you're using a hermeneutic of continuity, you'll just say, yeah, people are expected to uphold the same dogmas, but there's a call for people to be reconciled to the Catholic Church. That entails that they would embrace the dogma of papal supremacy, among others. Not mutually exclusive. You see how that works? That goes together. You see now how Vatican II can do that? You see how now John Paul II, Benedict, Francis, and now Leo XIV can all affirm papal supremacy and yet all call all Christians to full communion? They all did it. That's how. It's not hard. But if you're operating with a hermeneutic of rupture, you're not going to bother to try to reconcile them. If you don't have a lot of information, you're operating with just little info, and you're maybe a low resolution thinker, and you're susceptible to headlines, and you don't verify information, that's when you end up falling into these kinds of fake news headlines, and you'll end up sharing it on your social media and then looking ridiculous when you get called out for it. Okay, so let's go to it. This morning in the Apostolic Palace, the Holy Father Leo XIV received an audience, the representatives of other churches and ecclesial communities. Other churches means those with apostolic succession. Ecclesial communities means the Protestants, and other religions means other religions, non-Christian religions. Present in Rome for the Eucharistic celebration for the beginning of his Petrine ministry. The following is the address delivered by the Pope during the audience. With great joy, I extend my cordial greetings to all of you representatives of other churches and ecclesial communities, as well as other religions, who participated in the inaugural celebration of my ministry as Bishop of Rome and successor of Peter. I express fraternal affection to His All Holiness Bartholomew, His Beatitude Theophilus III, and His Holiness Mar Alwa III, and to each of you, I'm deeply grateful for your presence and prayers, which are a great great comfort and encouragement. One of the strong emphases of Pope Francis's pontificate, once again, quoting Pope Francis, is like every audience, it's a quote of Pope Francis in Vatican II every single time. One of the strong emphases, let's see if he quotes Vatican II, right? One of the strong emphases of Pope Francis's pontificate was that of universal fraternity. In this regard, the Holy Spirit really urged him to advance with great strides the initiatives already taken by previous popes, especially John the 23rd. The Pope of Fratelli Tutti promoted both the ecumenical path and interreligious dialogue. He did so above all by cultivating interpersonal relations in such a way that without taking anyone away from ecclesial bonds, the human trait of the encounter was always valued. May God help us to treasure His witness. My election has taken place during the year of the 1700th anniversary of the First Ecumenical Council of Nicaea. That council represents a milestone in the formulation of the creed shared by all churches and ecclesial communities. While we are on the journey to reestablishing full communion among all Christians, we recognize that this unity can only be in faith. As Bishop of Rome, I consider one of my priorities to be that of seeking the reestablishment of full and visible communion among all those who profess the same faith in God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, let me just stop there. Do you see anything in there about denying papal supremacy? Or even saying that to have this full communion, they don't have to accept papal supremacy? Was there anything in there about that? No, there wasn't, right? This is what they based it on. I kid you not. This is what they base the fake news headlines on. I can't say I'm speechless. I mean, I've seen it just so many hundreds of times at this point that let me give you an analogy, okay? Let me give you an analogy. Let's say there's this person, there's this owner of this house who requires everyone to take their shoes off at the door before they enter into their home, okay? Let's say they have that rule and they are adamant about it. There's never any exceptions. Wife comes home, kids come home, they all have to take their shoes off. There's no exceptions. End of story. Everyone has to take their shoes off, including the owner of the house, right? Okay. Now, what if the owner of that house posted on social media, I'm inviting all of my neighbors to come to my house? Okay. Does that now mean that all of his neighbors are now not required to take off their shoes when they come into their home? Was there anything about that? No. Was there anything that logically led to that? No. But that's what they just did. So if you saw like headline, homeowner abandons requirement for people to take their shoes off when they enter his home. Okay, what's your evidence for that? Well, he invited all of his neighbors to come over. Okay, but he might still have the same expectation that his neighbors take their shoes off when they come in the house, right? I mean, I kid you not. This is it. This is literally what they based it on. There's nothing else. There's no other headlines. There's no other comments that he made. That was it. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you're not surprised that Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Protestants will share this kind of fake news. We've seen it numerous times. We saw it under the previous Pope. We saw it actually even under Benedict to one degree. We saw it from some under John Paul II, but I think it actually got worse and worse and worse, and especially worse under the previous pontificate because social media became such a big thing. Oh, and now it's continuing under Leo. So no, to correct the commenter there, Let me pull it back up to correct the commenter who says that Lofton must be exhausted or spurging out or crashing out, to use his terms, by saying this. No, I'm not crashing out from anything from Pope Leo XIV, because I know how to verify sources and I know how to think critically and I know how to interpret things reasonably. So no, that doesn't cause me any distress. What does cause me to be frustrated is people who actually think that this is a difficulty that is a challenge somehow, to, Pope defenders or something like that. No, the problem is it's fake news. That's why. If I'm going to crash out, it's going to be because of people like this who share fake news. It's not going to be because of anything Leo says. I promise you, everything Leo has said, I'm able to deal with. Okay, it's not an issue. It's just more these other people. All right, so let's continue with the audience. Indeed, unity has always been a constant concern of mine, as witnessed by the motto I chose for my Episcopal ministry, in illo uno unum, an expression of Saint Augustine of Hippo that reminds us how we too, although we are many in the one that is Christ, we are one. What is more, our communion is realized to the extent that we meet in the Lord Jesus. The more faithful and obedient we are to him, the more united we are among ourselves. We Christians then are all called to pray and work together to reach this goal step by step, which is and remains the work of the Holy Spirit. Aware, moreover, that synodality, there he goes again with synodality, right? As he told us in his first address, that this is going to be a big thing of his, promoting Vatican II, continuing Pope Francis's legacy, and promoting synodality. Synodality and ecumenism are closely linked. I would like to assure you of my intention to continue Pope Francis's commitment to promoting the synodal nature of the Catholic Church and developing new and concrete forms for an ever stronger synodality in ecumenical relations. Is there anything in there that's opposed to papal supremacy? No. Because guess what? The very same people who promoted papal supremacy recognize synodal models. The same popes, the same councils, they're not incompatible. Pope Francis, being one of them, recognized papal supremacy and yet also held to a synodal model for some, for resolution for certain issues in the church. They're not incompatible. Synodality and papal supremacy go hand in hand. You want an example of that? Council of Florence. It's explicit about its position on papal supremacy, and yet it's within a synod. It's within a council, right? So there is a Catholic model of synodality that is compatible with papal supremacy. There's nothing in here about abandoning. All right, I'm beating a dead horse. You got it. Our common path can and must also be understood in the broad sense of involving everyone, in the spirit of human fraternity that I mentioned above. Now is the time for dialogue and building bridges. Ooh. That language. We heard a whole lot of that language from the last pontificate, right? Some of us are a little exhausted from that language. And the building bridges, well, that one was made famous by one Father James Martin in his famous book with that title. Those tend to be buzzwords in some quarters of the church, right? So some people have developed a fatigue of hearing terms like dialogue and building bridges for that reason. He says, I'm therefore pleased and grateful for the presence of representatives and of other religious traditions who share the search for God and his will, which is always and only the will of love and life for men and women and for all creatures. You have witnessed the remarkable efforts made by Pope Francis in favor of interreligious dialogue. Whoa, so he just said what Pope Francis was doing in interreligious dialogue is remarkable. Some Catholics will love it, others will hate it. Through his words and actions, he opened new avenues of encounter to promote the culture of dialogue as the path, mutual collaboration as the code of conduct, reciprocal understanding as the method and standard. And guess what he just quoted from? The Abu Dhabi document, a document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. The trads flipped out when that came out because they said Pope Francis is teaching heresy in there. And this is related to the Abrahamic house in Abu Dhabi, right? Where you have a synagogue, a mosque, and a Catholic church all next to each other. And they're like, this is just completely a denial of Jesus as the only way, the truth, and life. This is heresy. This is the same document where Pope Francis talked about how God wills religious diversity. You remember that? And Bishop Schneider freaked out. And he was like, and he put in his catechism, Pope Francis is teaching heresy. You remember that? Even though Bishop Schneider actually went and had a personal audience with Pope Francis, and Pope Francis gave him an orthodox interpretation of it and told him to share that with everyone. And he doesn't tell that to people in his catechism. You remember that? And we covered that. Yeah, that's the same document. Okay. So he and many others were flipping out over that. Now, what's wild is those same guys, those same bishops, those same critics of Pope Francis right now love Pope Leo. If they see this, I wonder what they're going to think, because he just affirmed Pope Francis's words and actions, and he's linking it to the Abu Dhabi document. Oh boy. Oh boy. Their hair is on fire. The pillars, thank you for the super sticker. Does not the Pope have the power to bind and loose the means and methods by which he exercises his own rights and prerogatives, electing for his own actions how his office operates in primacy, supremacy, and synodality? Sure, of course he does. I think that the difficulty is a lot of people don't understand that. So that's the challenge, right? They think that he has to do it a certain particular way, and they think that that's how it's always been done. And they're not aware that they have a very shallow understanding of the papacy, ecclesiology, and church history. And it really shows in these conversations. So yes, thank you for that. Okay. That's a big one, okay? So I thank the dicastery for interreligious dialogue for the essential role it plays in this patient work of encouraging meetings and concrete exchanges aimed at building relationships based on human fraternity. All right. Now on the section of Jews and Muslims. You ready for this one? Are you sitting down? If you've ever read anything from Vatican II, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Pope Francis, you don't need to sit down. Everything will be okay. But if you're not aware and if you don't have perspective, you might need to sit down. Okay. This might be a big one for you. All right. In a special way, I greet our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters. Wait, what? Jews and Muslims, brothers and sisters? Because of the Jewish roots of Christianity, all Christians have a special relationship with Judaism. The conciliar declaration, there it is again. Nostra Aetate. This is like the 5th time he's quoted it. I told y'all, he's always quoting Pope Francis, Vatican II. Every time, never fails. Here it is again. But this time, again, quoting Nostra Aetate from Vatican II, which is all about the relationship between the church and other religions. The declaration emphasizes the greatness of the spiritual heritage shared by Christians, Jews, encouraging mutual knowledge and esteem. The theological dialogue between Christian and Jews remains ever important and close to my heart. Now, that shouldn't be a surprise to you, because I told y'all, you probably didn't see it elsewhere, but I told y'all immediately, the day he was elected, I showed y'all a letter that he wrote to a Jewish rabbi telling him he upholds the dialogue between Catholics and Jews as outlined by the document Nostra Aetate. Okay, so that shouldn't come as a shock if you've been paying attention or if you've seen anything about Jewish Catholic dialogue in the post-conciliar period. Nothing new here. But if you're new to the conversation, Or you were under the impression that Pope Leo XIV is going to like do an about face and reverse Vatican II. You might need to sit down. It's going to come as a big shocker. Yeah, no, he's not reversing Vatican II. He's going to keep that going. Yeah, no, he's not reversing the interreligious dialogue in the post-conciliar period. He's keeping it going. Even in these difficult times marked by conflicts and misunderstandings, it is necessary to continue the momentum of this precious dialogue of ours. Relations between the Catholic Church and Muslims have been marked by a growing commitment to dialogue and fraternity, fostered by esteem for these our brothers and sisters who worship God, who is one, living and subsistent, merciful and mighty, the creator of heaven and earth, who has also spoken to humanity, quoting Vatican II. Uh-oh! You ready for some people to crash out? Talk about crashing out. You're ready. When they see this, some people are going to crash out. If you thought that he was going to reverse Vatican II in the post-conciliar notion that Muslims and Christians worship the same God, this is going to probably disturb you, right? So no, he's not reversing that. He's reaffirming that Muslims worship God, who is one. So the one God. That's why Vatican II says they worship the one, along with us adore the one true God. Pius X said the same thing. Damascene saw, from the church fathers tradition, he saw Muslims as a Christian heretical sect. He didn't even see it as a different religion. He saw it as Christian, just a Christian heresy. We've seen many popes in the first and especially second millennium, in the medieval period, all write letters to Muslim leaders telling them they worship the one true God, the same God of Catholics. So obviously Vatican II, the post-conciliar popes, they're not at odds with that long-standing tradition in Catholicism. But they always get hung up on how does that work with the idea that, unless you have the Son, you don't have the Father, and certain passages from 1 John. And those have been addressed ad nauseum, but they usually get hung up on that. And so they think Vatican II is teaching heresy. Well, if you think that's heretical, then you're going to say that Pope Leo XIV just committed a heresy, right? He just did a heresy, as some of them say. He did a heresy. It's going to be fascinating to see how some people react to it. Again, my prediction, just kind of based on the same content that I was going over from the previous stream, my prediction is they'll probably sweep this one under the rug and not really talk about it. Just pretend it's not happening until he goes into a mosque and prays with a Muslim like Benedict and Francis did. Then they can't hide it. They have to address it at some point. Oriental Orthodox, he says this show is based. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Which Oriental Orthodox community are you coming from? Please let me know in the chat. I'd love to know. Okay, so this approach based on mutual respect and freedom of conscience is a solid foundation for building bridges between our community. Wowzers. There goes those buzzwords again. Building bridges. Freedom of conscience. Yeah, a lot of people in the post-conciliar period have struggled with this, especially since Dignitatis Humanae from the Second Vatican Council. Also from Dignitas Infinita. But yeah, a lot of them have really struggled with this, right? The point in the question of freedom of conscience, how that works in society. Robert says, Michael, you always have a wee cheeky glint in your eyes. Are those Irish terms? I'm not familiar with that. I'm from Monroe, Louisiana. We don't use those terms. Kingdom of the Son of God says Vatican II is a new age religion. See, that's how a lot of people see the post-conciliar period and Vatican II. A lot of Catholics see it that way, right? A lot of Catholics have been critical of the church for that reason. They see it as that. They see it as the French Revolution, basically, within the church. And in fact, Ratzinger did kind of say that's what it was at Vatican II, although he was in favor of it. But he basically did say the ideals of the French Revolution made their way into the Catholic Church through Vatican II. He was just in favor of it when he said that. He said that as a young Ratzinger who was present at Vatican II. To all of you representatives of other religious traditions, I express my gratitude for your participation in this meeting and for your contribution to peace. In a world wounded by violence and conflict, each of the communities represented here brings its own contribution of wisdom, compassion, and commitment to the good of humanity and the preservation of our common home. I'm convinced that if we are in agreement and free from ideological and political conditioning, we can be effective in saying no to war, yes to peace, no to arms race, and yes to disarmament. No to an economy that impoverishes people and the earth, and yes to integral development. The witness of our fraternity, which I hope we will be able to show with effective gestures, will certainly contribute to building a more peaceful world, something that all men and women of goodwill desire in their hearts. Dear friends, thank you again for your closeness. Let us ask for God's blessing in our hearts. May his infinite goodness and wisdom help us to live as his children and as brothers and sisters to each of you, so that hope may grow in the world. I offer you my heartfelt gratitude. Now, this is, again, no different than what we've seen from Pope Francis. But let me ask you this, just theoretically. Let's say Pope Francis gave this exact papal address. Okay? What do you think the critics would say online? What do you think their reaction would be? You think they would say, oh, this is wonderful? No, what they would likely say is kind of what we saw there earlier, where people are saying he denied papal supremacy. But what we would also likely see people say, wait, you got all these schismatics, you got all these false religions present. Why didn't you call them to repent? Why didn't you urge them to flee from the fires of hell and to reunite with the Catholic Church, outside of which there is no salvation? Right? That would be the angle they would take. The curious thing will be, is that what people will say today? Are they going to say, why didn't Leo call them to repentance? Why didn't Leo warn them against the eternal lake of fire? Let's see if they're consistent. I know if it were Pope Francis, they would say that. Let's see if they do that to Pope Leo. Wow, there was a lot going on in this one, as you can see. But it's really more of the same. As I've told y'all, the next Pope was going to be somebody who continues out the reforms of Vatican II, continues the legacy of Pope Francis. There it is once again. Once again, he's doing that, right? So if you love what Vatican II did with the church, I'm talking about the documents. If you love the post-conciliar period and how it has conducted, the Catholic Church has conducted itself in interreligious dialogue and ecumenical matters, then you'll love Pope Leo. If you hated those things and you even think it's heretical, you'll likely, if you're consistent and if you're paying attention, you'll hate Pope Leo. And the reality right now is some people have their head in the sand and are pretending that Leo isn't saying these things, and they are the ones who are critical of it. Give them time. They'll eventually get the memo, and then they'll start turning on Pope Leo XIV, just as they did with Pope Francis. Right now, they're in the honeymoon phase, thinking that he's a rad trad. He's a traditionalist because he wore a fiddleback, right? and he says some Latin on occasion. So he's got to be a trad, right? When they finally get the memo and realize that isn't the case, they'll turn on him. Also, the progressives, when they find out he's not progressive enough, and he is not going to say, guess what, guys? Homosexual unions are blessed in front of God's eyes. This is no longer a sin. Same-sex acts aren't wrong. When they find out that he doesn't adopt that view, but has the same view of Pope Francis on fiducia supplicans, has the same view of Pope Francis on the question of homosexuality and morality. When they find that out, they're going to turn on him too. They're not going to be happy. So your real extreme progressives, the ones who are pushing for the church to change its morality, they're not going to be happy with Pope Leo XIV because he's not going to change the church's morality. I can tell you that right now. He's not going to. There are no signs that he was going to do that whenever he was a bishop, whenever he was a cardinal. There's no signs now as pope. You can abandon that at this point if you think that he's going to do that. But also, if you think he's going to reverse Pope Francis and reverse Vatican II and is going to be the staunch traditionalist, you can abandon that as well. In reality, he's somewhere in the middle. He's somewhere in between. As I told y'all, he was from day one. Okay, what else do we have here in the chat? Tanner says dialogue is necessary for evangelization. Anyone who's done missions work will tell you that. Sure. But I think where they're coming from is they're saying that if it's just dialogue for dialogue's sake and you never get to a call of conversion, then it's not the right approach. I think that's where they're kind of coming from. What else? Can they do it soon? Tired of seeing fake Catholics LARPing as Catholic. I'm sorry, they've been doing that for a long time, for over a decade now. Don't expect that to change. What else we have? Is there a New Testament quote on the lines of nobody comes to me unless the Father beckons? Yeah, so there's John 6 and there's also John 14:6, right? So you'll need to read chapter 6 and chapter 14. Thank you for the super sticker. The 12 Pillars says, for those angry for the Pope's kindness to non-Catholics, have the charity to recall that vehemently anti-Catholic Protestants, Orthodox Muslims will curse their co-religionists just for meeting with Leo XIV. Thank you for that. And I think where they're coming from, however, is not that he has kindness to non-Catholics. Their contention is that the Vatican is not calling them to abandon heresy, to abandon their errors, and to be conformed to the message of the gospel and to convert to the Catholic Church, outside of which there is no salvation. That's where they're coming from. One commenter says, God loves the sinner but hates the sin. It's not a sin to be born in a different religion. God judges them by their sins. Yeah, I don't know anybody who says that it's a sin to be born. I think where, again, some of the critics are coming from is a lack of a clear call to repent of sin, repent of schism, repent of idolatry, and to embrace the truth. That's where they're coming from. That's what they would argue. Wise says, who am I not to accept Vatican II? Well, where the critics come from on that is they'll say there's nothing that's newly dogmatically defined at Vatican II, and they'll latch onto Paul VI, who said that in an audience, and that's true. But as I've pointed out numerous times, just because there's no new solemn dogmatic definition doesn't mean there are no new infallible teachings. Those are not the same thing. There's a difference between a dogmatic definition and definitive Catholic doctrine. Moreover, more importantly than anything infallible, numerous acts of Vatican II were authentic and binding and require religious submission of intellect and will. They're missing that whole bit from their paradigm. So whether infallible or not, it doesn't matter. It still requires your assent. Just like half of the ecumenical councils in all of church history, actually all of them, many of them have acts that are non-infallible in nature, but they're still binding on people, right? Yeah. Okay. Same with Vatican II. But that's where they're coming from. They have a misunderstanding and a deficiency of the magisterium and their relationship to the magisterium. Chris says, if they do not ask them to convert, is this an error? I'm all about dialogue, though. Some will say it's an error. Others will say, no, you just need to model the gospel in your behavior and let the Holy Spirit do the rest. So there's different perspectives here, different approaches. Michael is part Irish, no doubt. I am. I actually am. I don't remember how much, 10, 20%, somewhere around that. Yeah. I don't know anything about it, though. Shout out to all the Irish viewers. Okay. Do Jews fear the fires of hell? many Jews don't believe in hell because it is less clear in the Old Testament. You do have some passages from Isaiah and some from Daniel that would appear to teach the doctrine of hell, but it's not as explicit as you find in the New Testament. And for that reason, many Jews have interpreted those passages differently, and they would argue that there is no such thing. They would just argue that hell is the grave, it's death. And so there's different views among Jews here, but many of them don't believe in hell. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Have you made peace with all these different points of view and positions? Without being specific, do you struggle with accenting? Accenting? Do you mean assenting to any of the post-conciliar teachings or its focus? Well, I mean, it's a great question, and it's one I've talked about at length. But just to answer your question very quickly, there are ways to harmonize everything that you have in the post-conciliar period. Now, whether or not you're happy with the harmonization is kind of a different question. But there's ways to harmonize in the same way there's ways to harmonize tensions in the Bible, or tensions in an ecumenical council in the first millennium, or tensions in an ecumenical council like Trent. You know, there's tensions everywhere. Do I struggle? I think intellectually I could see how you can harmonize certain things to where I don't, if that's what you mean by struggle, I don't struggle in that sense. Like I don't lose sleep over it if that's what you're asking. Okay. Do Jews believe in heck? That's what I should have said, right? Okay, Wise says, for sure, I just don't get why they can't accept Vatican II while still being faithful to all Catholic tradition. Does Vatican II somehow contradict Catholic tradition? Some argue yes, others argue no. For example, let me show you Benedict the 16th's Christmas address from 2005. I just did a course on this, so I'll plug the course here in a moment, but let me answer your question first. You will want to read this address. This is required reading for all who are interested in this discussion. Address of His Holiness Benedict XVI to the Roman Curia, offering them as Christmas greetings, 22nd of December 2005. Scroll down to the part where he starts talking about Vatican II, John the 23rd. And you're going to need to read up on the parts where he talks about a hermeneutic of reform, also called a hermeneutic of continuity, as you can see here, hermeneutic of reform. As opposed to the hermeneutic of discontinuity. He warns against a hermeneutic of discontinuity and favors a hermeneutic of continuity and reform. What does that mean? So what he means by that is, he says, there's tensions with Vatican II and everything in the pre-conciliar period, just as there's tensions in everything else. In the Bible, in other councils, there's always tensions. But the methodology by which you interpret the data will determine what conclusion you have. So if you have a hermeneutic of reform and continuity, you'll look for ways to harmonize them. If you have a hermeneutic of rupture and discontinuity, you'll look for ways to put things against each other and separate them and make them contradict each other. He says, don't do the contradiction route. Don't use that method. He says, that's wrong. He says, use a hermeneutic of reform and continuity. And so for those who say the Vatican II teaches something contrary to Catholic tradition or the pre-conciliar period, Benedict is saying they're using the wrong hermeneutic. Because with that same hermeneutic, you can make the Bible contradict itself. With that same hermeneutic, you can make the magisterium before Vatican II contradict itself. Guess what? Eastern Orthodox do it all the time. They say Vatican I contradicts this and that council in the first millennium. Whereas a Catholic operating with a hermeneutic of continuity would say Vatican I is the logical progression of the Sixth Ecumenical Council in Agatha's letter. So We've explored this numerous times on this video, but there's a quick answer for you. There's much more content that you can go to find out more. A course specifically on this is rtcourses.com. R is in reason, T is in theology. Courses.com. Go to my magisterial difficulties, exploring tensions in the documents of the church. And I do go through questions with Vatican II, outside the church, there is no salvation, religious liberty, death penalty, slavery. And we talk about how the magisterium works, and we talk about different ways in which people try to either harmonize or say that there's contradictions. So your question is very relevant to that course I just did. Go and check it out if you haven't purchased that already. Okay, thank you for the super sticker. The 12th pillar says, there is much pain from the past, the sack of Constantinople, that we proceed in charity to greet the other, in dialogue on differences in faith, for hope and conversion, including our own faults. So that is the position that the post-conciliar popes are calling for. They're calling for less tension and kind of letting go of the past and less hostility. You'll notice that Catholics and Eastern Orthodox online have not gotten the memo. What else do we have? Black Angel says, I'm wondering how aware Pope Leo is of the teachings and dangers of Islam. I don't know how aware he is of various Islamic views in communities. I'm not sure. But we do know what his perspective is about Islam from what we just saw with that audience. Stefan says, most of the dissenting voices I see all over social media are enthralled with the Latin Mass. I have very good friends who attend Latin Mass, but for some reason it fosters division, which is unfortunate. Well, let me correct that. The Latin Mass itself doesn't foster division. I don't believe that. I don't believe that it's the problem. I don't think that's the issue. Whether there's reasons to reform the liturgy, different question. Is the Latin Mass itself the problem? No, it's some of the people, and not all the people, some of the people. They've weaponized it. They've hijacked it. A knife can be a really good thing, right? It can help defend your family. It can help you, cut some meat up to eat it, right? It can help all sorts of situations. It could be a really good thing. It can also be a bad thing if you take it and abuse it and murder somebody, right? So it's the same thing. The liturgy in and of itself is not bad, but some have attempted to hijack it. So I would just add that qualification there. In fairness to everyone who appreciates the Latin Mass and is not weaponizing it, it would be good not to lump them in with others, right? Thank you for the super sticker. Go ahead and like everybody. God bless you, Michael. Thank you too. Yeah, please hit that like button. Appreciate you doing that. Okay, what else we have? Wise says, I attend the Latin Mass. Yeah. Soldier of Mary says, Latin Mass is not the problem. It's the people who idolize the liturgy. And yeah, and it's not all of them, as I've pointed out many times. There are some good people who just love and appreciate that form. And, there's room within the Catholic Church to appreciate some liturgies more than others. There's room for that. It's whenever you start saying one offers more grace than another, or you say one is valid and another isn't, or you say you can't go to that one or you're in sin, or you say mine is somehow superior to yours in honoring God. And that's when the Vatican starts to say, the magisterium starts to say, you've gone too far. What's the alternative to dialogue and bridge building? Hostility and fighting. I'm being flippant with you. Look, there's nothing wrong properly understood with dialogue and bridge building. It's just those are buzzwords that usually some progressives use and have hijacked, right? So anytime somebody says it, my ears perk up. It's like, Oh, okay. Like journeying with, accompanying with, yes, the term synodality, even though I get nothing wrong with these terms in and of themselves, but sometimes they're used as buzzwords and people have abused the meaning of them. And so anytime somebody says it, it's like, people are going to be on the edge, right? I'm not saying that they need to be on the edge. I'm just saying that people are going to be, because it has been hijacked by some of the progressives, right? So the German bishops, they hijacked the notion of synodality. And so the Vatican's understanding of synodality is not the German bishops. But because what the German bishops did with synodality, they gave it a bad name. They gave it a bad reputation. So that's kind of happened with the concepts of dialogue, bridge building. So no, you shouldn't even have to ask what are the alternatives. There's nothing wrong with them in and of themselves. Properly defined, properly done, nothing wrong with them. Okay. Zachary says Michael Lofton is cool. Thank you. At least I'm not. This is way better than some of the comments I normally see, right? Cora, thank you for the super sticker. Reading your book, Answering Orthodoxy more critical of Catholics than Catholics are of them. Roman Catholics call it the other long thoughts. Some Catholics are critical in the polemical way that you see some Orthodox online. Some Orthodox are not critical of Catholics. Some are. So some Catholics are, some Orthodox are, some Catholics aren't, some Orthodox aren't. If you're just talking about general trends, yes, the online Orthodox community tends to be very vitriolic and very hateful towards Catholicism. You have some of that in some online Catholic circles. I think it's to a lesser degree. On the flip side, you have a whole lot more online Catholics showing that kind of hostility to the Catholic Church itself, which I think is a self-defeating position. Anyways, Michael Lofton is fair. I try to be. Noel says ecumenism is to destroy the church. That's certainly not how John Paul II understood it, or Vatican II itself, right? But there have been different ways in which people have spoken about it in a way that you would conclude that. And then there's what the magisterium actually says about ecumenism, which tends to be a little different than what you just said there. So, but yeah, your comment is a perfect illustration of what I'm saying, right? You say the word ecumenism, people define it differently and will interpret it differently. Some will interpret it as dialoguing with people to try to help them bring them back to the Catholic Church. And others will interpret it as indifferentism, relativism. I'm okay, you're okay, doesn't really matter. We all believe the same thing. They'll interpret it that way. So it just, different people are going to interpret it differently. 12 Pillars, thank you. The Latin Mass, Gallican, St. John Chrysostom, Novus Ordo, Gies, Ambrosian, Psalm Rite, Syrian Rite. We should be amazed God called forth such riches in liturgy over time and space. Well, it's kind of unfortunate how the Byzantine liturgy supplanted some of those historically. The Byzantine emperor and empire didn't always honor other local liturgies and replace them. And so the diversity of the liturgical traditions, they aren't as diverse now, partly because of that. Also, the Roman Rite kind of took over a lot of the Latin West, and so it also supplanted for various reasons many of those Western liturgical forms that you're referring to. You still have pockets of them here and there, but they're not as widespread as they used to be. Oh, thank you so much for joining, Mare. Thank you. I appreciate you becoming a new member there. Hope you enjoy the patron-only content. Do the trads dislike John Paul II to say John Paul II too? I just can't keep up with it. The ones who are consistent will dislike him because everything they hated about Pope Francis, they will find in John Paul II. For those who haven't gotten the memo yet, they'll like John Paul II, and then they'll hate Pope Francis. When they eventually get the memo, then they'll hate him. So if they hated Pope Francis with the whole Pachamama thing, wait until they find out about a CC 1986 with John Paul II. Just wait, right? They haven't gotten the memo yet. They haven't connected the dots, right? The few who have tend to not like John Paul II, and the original Ratrads hated John Paul II for these very reasons, and they quickly became Sedevacantists, or they went to the SSPX or something like that. Okay, what else do we have? Michael, you definitely look Irish. All right, I'll take your word for it. Jimmy says, "Oh, I like seeing these super chats." Yeah, I appreciate the questions, and I also appreciate the support with super chats. So thank y'all so much for doing that. Saintly Repent says, "Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Thank you. Hopefully this is helpful." Yes, many despise John Paul II. Some of the names they call him are worse than what the Lutherans called Pope. Right. So like Lefebvre said that John Paul II was the Antichrist, right? The founder of the SSPX. So he was not popular in his own day with the Ratrads of his day. So what was the bombshell that Leo dropped on the heathens? The bombshell is that he didn't do that. That's the bombshell. No, I think that Leo will bring the SSPX back into communion. Okay, so no, and here's why. Because of what Pope Benedict said. Do you remember what Benedict wrote to the bishops? Let me pull it up to you. Pope Benedict XVI wrote, after lifting the 4 bishops that Lefebvre that Lefebvre ordained, after lifting those 4 bishops' excommunications, he wrote to the bishops and said this: "This disciplinary level needs to be distinguished from the doctrinal level. The fact that the SSPX does not possess a canonical status of the church is not, in the end, based on disciplinary reasons, but on doctrinal reasons." So all of the online Catholic personalities that were selling you a bill of goods, telling you, all he has to do, the next pope, all he's got to do is bring in the SSPX, write them a piece of paper saying that you're in full communion and they're good to go. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know why? Because you can't do that with Protestants. You can't do that with Eastern Orthodox. Now, they are further removed in some ways, of course, but the same reason why you can't do that with Eastern Orthodox, you can't do it with SSPX. Why? Well, the Orthodox have valid sacraments. They're valid local churches, right? Yeah. But they don't accept the same doctrines. That's what Benedict is saying. You can't just write them a piece of paper saying, "You're regularized now, go home." That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And there's a really popular YouTuber saying that, and it's just a train wreck. It's not at all what his hero, Benedict XVI, said. Benedict is saying there's a doctrinal obstacle here. So until the doctrinal issue is resolved, you can't have reunion. You can't have it. So it's not as simple as just saying, here you go, you're good to go. Leo can't do that because he knows there is a doctrinal difference. And when you have this level of doctrinal difference, if you just bring them into communion, it's a false communion because you don't have one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That one includes one faith. When they believe different things about the profession of faith, you no longer have one faith. They think the profession of faith promulgated by John Paul II, they said it's modernist. That's no longer one faith. So until those issues are resolved and they accept the doctrinal teachings of Vatican II and the doctrinal profession of faith of John Paul II, there is no doctrinal unity on those points of contention. And so you just can't just say, "Oh, you're good to go." Any more than you could just tell the Orthodox, "Hey, come into communion, this other stuff we'll figure out later." You can't do that for the same reasons. Okay. It's great question. Noel says, one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, no salvation outside the church, not the synodal church. Thank you for the comment. You have perfectly vindicated me from my stream last week. I'll pull it up for y'all so you can go and watch it. You've illustrated exactly what I told y'all would happen whenever these topics are brought up, because it's what predictably happens every time for people who don't have enough catechesis. So for people who need some additional catechesis, you'll just get that level of a comment, right? If you need, or if you have that level of catechesis, here's the antidote. Go to my lecture, I say lecture, video. It's basically a lecture at this point. Outside the church, there is no salvation, ? A comprehensive explanation. Go and watch that, and you'll have a better understanding, and you'll also see exactly what I'm saying. Your comment there illustrates exactly what I was telling people in that video. Ramses, thank you. Does 1 Samuel 15:22, obedience is better than sacrifice, fit into the current liturgy war SSPX discussions? It does, but many people don't feel that it does, because they feel that the questions of the liturgy are no longer just differences in discipline, but are matters that impacted the faith. So if you hold to kind of a Peter Kwasniewski view of the Novus Ordo, you're going to say this is something that impacts the faith. Or if you hold to an SSPX view, you'll say that it's sinful, it's an offense to God, even when it's celebrated properly. The Novus Ordo is an offense to God. That's why they'll tell them, don't go to the Novus Ordo, even if it's a properly celebrated one. Just stay at home, pray your rosary. They'll tell them, don't go to confession from a Novus Ordo priest. Go to, a Latin Mass kind of priest. Because of this, they say the liturgy itself is an offense to God. So it's no longer in the realm of disciplinary differences. They're putting it in the realm of a difference in doctrine and piety. So it does impact it, right? It certainly is relevant, but they're not going to read it that way. They're not going to read it as merely being obedient, because they're going to say, what do you mean? I have to be obedient to sin? I have to be obedient to something that's offensive to God? That doesn't make sense. Or what? You want me to be obedient to someone who changes the mass of the ages? Right? That's their perspective. That's where they're coming from. That's how they see it. Jen says, Michael's getting cranky at this nonsense. Time for a nap. Y'all know I don't take naps, and no, I'm not getting cranky. I find it entertaining. What's the doctrinal issue with SSPX? There are ecclesiological issues that are doctrinal in nature. I've explored that in depth. Watch any of my videos on the SSPX or on Lefebvre or interviews with John Salza. Are they hoping to reverse Vatican II? I have seen some of the traditionalists hoping for a reversal of Vatican II. I saw one of them 1 or 2 days ago post a video, is Leo going to undo the reforms of Vatican II or reverse Vatican II or something like that? And I think he's come to the recognition that the answer is no. Jin Do says, Michael's Southern woman coming in. I don't know what that's a reference to. Mari, I appreciate this channel. Thank you. I appreciate you and your support. What else we have here? Can the Radtrads be Donatists? Consider Donatists? Some of them, not all of them. They're not all in the same category, and they don't all have the same views. So some of them would not. Some would. I do have a video specifically on that. There is a clip, St. Augustine versus the Donatist heresy. There is another interview that's based off of with Dr. Papandrea. And so that is going to be, we do explore that in the interview on radical traditionalism in the early church with Dr. Jim Papandrea. So you'll want to go and watch that video at Yeah, we talk about that at around 9:45. The Donatists at 3402. We talk about that there. Okay, so maybe go and watch that. Vatican II was a council. Wouldn't it require a council to undo it? Either an ecumenical council or a pope, right? I mean, you have that kind of that level of magisterial authority can be exercised either by the pope individually or by an ecumenical council. When you say undo it, maybe some of the disciplinary aspects could be undone by a future ecumenical council or by the pope. But when you mean the doctrinal teachings, that's a different question. Can the doctrines of Vatican II be undone? Depends on what doctrines we're talking about, but highly unlikely that even some of the potential ones would be. Some of the non-definitive teachings, highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. And it's not just Vatican II, it's all of the popes who've promulgated Vatican II and reasserted those teachings in their encyclicals, apostolic constitutions, motu proprios, and so on. It's like a whole bunch of post-conciliar documents you would have to reverse as well. Michael, you need a salary from the Vatican due to how much you are defending it from false news. I don't expect that anytime soon. But I do appreciate y'all's support. And so if you want to help cover the costs and so help me support my family is my livelihood, I definitely would appreciate the support. And a great way to do it is, there's PayPal, GoFundMe in the show notes. There's my Patreon. There's the join button right here next to the sub button on YouTube. There's all sorts of ways you can support me. Please consider that. Or rtcourses.com. Go and purchase one of my courses there. Michael's been doing this so long, there's a lecture for that. In reality, that's likely the case. So if you have a question, if there is an objection, I've likely already covered it with a catalog of over 4,000 videos at this point. Odds are I've covered it already. Michael, what's your papal name going to be? That's funny. Some people were joking, saying, Michael, did you get a call from the conclave when the cardinals were gathered in conclave? Noel says Father Paul Gruner. Oh boy, I haven't heard Father Gruner's name in quite some time now, after passed away maybe 5-6 years or so ago. So yeah, you're really into that, huh? I used to be into Father Gruner as well back in the day. I actually wrote for Catholic Family News for a little while. That's kind of related to some of his circles, and used to be really big into the Fatima Center back when I was a radical traditionalist, and was, ate up every lecture of his and all that. And I ended up finding out how wrong he was about the Fatima question, the third secret, numerous other things. But yeah, I used to really be really big into him. It sounds like the material you're looking into is not helpful for you, in my estimation. Having already been down that road, you're setting yourself up for a huge failure. But I understand why you don't think that right now. I get it. Kifos says, I would choose Hormisdas II. Ramses, I can't send a super chat for some reason. Take my money. I don't know why you can't send a super chat, but hey, if you do want to send some support, there is a link in the show notes, so GoFundMe link, PayPal, numerous other things. But thank you so much, Ramsey. Ramses, you've been a great supporter of the channel for quite some time now. Thank you. The Latin language won't get you into heaven. I don't know anybody who believes that, though. Should look into Father Paul Kramer. I was into those guys, and pretty much everything I said there about Gruner, I would say even more about Kramer. I think you're going down the wrong direction, and you're going down a rabbit trail you're going to end up feeling you wasted a lot of time with. I know you don't see that at this point. I get that, but just trying to, as one human being to another who doesn't want another person to waste her time and go down the wrong path, I think you need to retrace your steps, because I think you're going down a path of stuff that's just not going to help you. And you'll end up likely concluding that you went down the wrong path at some point. Okay. Is there any difference on the Catholic Church's position on SSPX, EO, and Coptics? Sure, there are. So with the SSPX, they would actually be closer to the Catholic Church's position than Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, of which the Coptics are part of. A degree of separation after that would be the Eastern Orthodox, and maybe a degree of separation after that would be the Oriental Orthodox, including the Coptics. But yeah, you of course got Lumen Gentium paragraphs 14 through 16 that you'll want to go read. 14 through 15 is going to be relevant to your question and kind of talks about degrees of unity. It doesn't mention SSPX, but what you can do is interject between paragraph 14, where it talks about Catholics and full communion, and paragraph 15, where it starts to talk about Eastern Orthodox. Interject the SSPX in between them because they're actually there. Of course, there was no SSPX at Vatican II, right? Okay. I think I grabbed everything there. Making sure I didn't miss any super chats too. Well, I think I did. JP, Mike, where are all of these trads getting their radical views? I mean, there's no one place. What often happens is they're influenced by online content creators, and they tend to look to them for signals in their queue. Very, very few of them are independent thinkers. Most of them are just kind of dependent on others. So they tend to just kind of look to each other, and it becomes an echo chamber and all of that. Some of the criticisms originate in non-Catholic communities. So some of the criticisms that they're using against the Catholic Church actually originate outside the church from non-Catholic communities, and whether they realize it or not, they are borrowing from their arguments. It's a complex question. Thank you for the super sticker, 12 pillars. You've been awesome. Have you done a video on whether East and West could, in theory, at least find a solution to the controversy over the Filioque Maximus Confessor's formula through Son? It's debatable whether or not Maximus's formula there through the Son is the same as what through the Son means at Florence and by the time of Florence, or even what some of the early Eastern Fathers meant by through the Son. It's debatable, right? Putting that issue to the side. A theory was a solution to the controversy was already found at Florence on that question. The problem was Eastern Orthodox deviated from that solution for a few reasons. So that the groundwork is already there. It's already been done. That's already happened. It's just whether or not the Orthodox will accept it is a different question. In theory, it could happen, of course, but here's what's going to happen. Not everybody will be on board with it. So the ones who do accept it, and if they do want to come back into communion, they'll come back into communion, and they'll likely be Eastern Catholics, unless they join the Latin Rite. They'll be Eastern Catholics. And for the people who stay behind and don't come back into communion with the Catholic Church and don't agree, they'll just replace the people who left. If there's any bishops or patriarchs who went back into communion, they'll just replace them, just like they did every other time when you had patriarchs and bishops come into full communion. They'll just replace them, and they'll keep on trucking. They'll keep on going. They'll keep on doing what they do. It's like a hydra. When you cut off one head, you're gonna have two more. It's just you bring some into communion, they'll just be replaced by others, and so you'll never have a case where they all of a sudden all of them accept the dogmas of the church in some kind of way that's digestible and reconcilable with their tradition. You're not going to have everyone do. You'll always have some people who hang back and say, oh, I don't accept it. You guys are heretics for leaving. You're schismatics for leaving. And they'll replace them, and they'll continue along like they've done since the schism. I hate to break that to you, but I mean, that's reality. Why do trads say 90% of the prayers in the liturgy were removed? And would it be true to say that certain liturgies may be said to be more meritorious by virtue of the prayers they include? Yeah, we've explored these questions, certainly, but just to answer you briefly, it's not very accurate to say that 90% have been removed, but let's just pretend that that's true, right? Okay, so what? I mean, liturgically, in the development of liturgical history, the Latin Rite was truncated significantly by Leo the Great, Gregory the Great, and others in the first millennium. And so it's been truncated. Many of the Eastern liturgies have been truncated. Chrysostom and others, allegedly, Chrysostom truncated the Byzantine liturgy. Like, it's just very common. So what? So what? I mean, the Roman Rite has always been known for its efficiency and brevity. Always. So what? Now, if you want to argue, well, maybe it needs to be longer. Maybe it needs to have more prayers. Sure, fine. Go ahead. Go for it. There's different perspectives there, but you can't pretend like this is somehow new with the post-conciliar reform. Now, can you say that some are more meritorious in virtue of the prayers than others? So it kind of goes back to the question of, are some liturgical forms, do they provide more grace than others? Some say that. Some have been arguing that. But it's not theologically tenable from the Catholic perspective, but some Catholics are arguing that. That's one of the problems, is some people have been saying the Latin Mass offers more grace, therefore go to the Latin Mass. That's a problem. That's one of the reasons why you had restrictions with the Latin Mass communities under Francis. That was one of the reasons. If you can get rid of people using arguments like that, you might actually have the church once again opening up more to the extraordinary form. But it has been weaponized, and that's one example of how some have weaponized it. To say that some of the prayers are more meritorious or offer more grace is a form of superstition, and it reflects a poor understanding of the sacraments and the transmission of grace. At best, you could just say that you're more disposed to receive grace with this particular liturgy than another, but that's more you. That's not the liturgy offering more grace. The liturgies, from the Catholic perspective, all of them offer the exact same amount of grace. But how receptive you are to that grace could depend on whether you prefer this liturgy or not, right? But in that case, it's not the liturgy, it's you. JP, Mike, how did you deconstruct from being a radical traditionalist? A better understanding of how the magisterium works, what the Catholic Church has taught about the magisterium, a better understanding of church history, a better understanding of the ecumenical councils, the magisterium and church history, the development of the various liturgies. So a better historical perspective to kind of root and ground me and give me better perspective. And then again, what one's obligations are to the magisterium, how it works, difficulties with the magisterium and church history. Seeing all of that showed me I bought into a lot of misinformation. Looking into some of the narratives that I was told, I then found out it was based on fake news. And so it took some time. It takes time to undo narratives, takes time to find out, oh, I missed this, that significantly changes everything, you know? It was a long process. See all sorts of questions. I was looking for something maybe more relevant to today's stream, though. Takes a lot of humility to admit as openly as you do, Michael. Good example. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Thank you. James says these clickbait titles and photos are too much, Michael. I don't know what you mean. Everything I've posted is true. So I don't know what to do if you think that's clickbait. Do you know what clickbait is, by the way? I don't think you do. I don't think you understand what clickbait is. So clickbait doesn't mean like catchy titles. It means that you advertise one thing and then you deliver something else. So if I told you Pope Leo XIV abolished the Latin Mass, and I put that in the title, and then the video I give you is about a new Barbie doll and telling you about the new Barbie doll and how the length of the hair of this Barbie doll is 1 inch shorter than previous Barbie dolls. I have no idea anything about Barbie dolls. I'm just making this stuff up. So creative my imagination is. But you see, if I advertise one thing and give you something completely different, that actually is clickbait. But yeah, that is bait and switch. That's clickbait. That's not the same as something catchy, right? So I resent that you accused me of clickbait. Okay. Thanks for the explanation. You're welcome. You're welcome. I know it was asked in good faith. So, but as a content creator, I resent you using that. He says, I take it back. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, we're good. Okay. Does Pope Leo know that Taylor Marshall paid someone to steal the Our Lady of the Amazon? I think he paid for his flight, right? He paid for his flight and all that to bring him there to, yeah, that whole fiasco. There's actually, oddly enough, a set of a contest, the Diamond Bros, who did a video talking about that situation. I brought it up at the time, but it slipped under the radar. But I think that set of contests, when he did his video on Taylor Marshall, brought that more into the forefront. Okay. Michael is a Barbie girl in a Barbie. His shelves are plastic. His books are slapstick. Yeah. I don't know anything about Barbie. So that's just how creative my imagination can be. Why do I think that some people are so aggressively saying that Muslims, saying that Muslims worship the same God? 1 second, y'all. Sorry about that. Quick answer for you. So I think it's a combination of things. Number one, it's a theological hang up. They wonder, how does that work with 1 John? Unless you have the Son, you don't have the Father. And then also it's likely other biases against Muslims, right, that factor in. So a lot of the online content about Muslims they've bought into, and a lot of the hatred and hostility there they bought into. So that's likely it. Have I read Unpacking Palinism? Palimism. I don't think I've read that one. Let me see. Oh, yes, this one by Locutus. Yeah. This one was republished. Yes. Yeah, this is an old one republished by Dr. Locutus, who I've endorsed multiple times. Did I endorse this particular volume? I may have. I may be on the back having endorsed it. I don't recall. Let me look at the website. Am I on here? Okay, I don't think I'm on this one. Or at least I'm not on the web page endorsing it. I don't know if I am on the book. Yeah, I didn't recognize the title at first. Sorry about that. I think I actually even have a video with his grandson about it. The little Lofton appeared. Yeah. Imagine that's a green screen. Here we go with that one again. Here we go with the claim that my background is a green screen. Why is it so hard for people to believe that I have books and that I read books? He says I'm joking. Well, are you? I don't know. All right, thank you for the super sticker. Would you consider a video on liturgical history examining the Novus Ordo questions of development, comparisons of elements shared across Vatican II, pre-Vatican II rites, examination of all liturgies? Yeah, we've done all of that before. Yeah, I've done that before. Maybe it's time to do that again, though, right? But yeah, I got videos on every single one of those. I'm sorry, Taylor Marshall did what? Oh, boy. Well, no point in reinventing the wheel. I will point you to a Diamond Bros video. Diamond Bros have, strawmanned me and slandered me and all that, so I don't recommend them. But they do kind of outline to a certain degree the this situation we're talking about here. So with that caveat in mind, yeah, it's this one right here. Taylor Marshall's Publicity Stunts and False Theology Exposed by VaticanCatholic.com. Neither from the Vatican nor Catholic. It's like the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman nor empire. I don't know why somebody who's not at the Vatican and is not a Catholic calls themselves Vatican Catholic, but great one. It's obvious that you read a lot. I don't know. The way people speak about me, they're just shocked that I have. I tell people you can go to any of the books in here. I probably have, I don't know, maybe at this point about good 4,000 volumes in here. You go to any one of them, you'll see notes at the beginning, because I usually write my notes at the beginning of a book. Makes it easier, right? And if there's a point that you like that you want to remember in the book, write the notes at the beginning of the book and the page number. And if you're like, okay, I remember I read that in this book, but I don't remember what page, you just go and look at the front where you wrote that note. Bam, there it is. There's a hack for you. I watch the Diamond Bros for comedic purposes. That makes sense. Yeah, that does make sense. Are the Diamond Bros calling cheap magic tricks and escape artist demonics? Yes, they are. They did have a whole video on that, and I did review that as a comedy hour video on this channel. That was a really fun one. Every now and then we have comedy hour videos, and there's no shortage of content there from the Diamond Bros. I'm trying to be nice, y'all, but I mean, it is what it is. Glory of the Crusades. I think I have that one. Let me double check. Let me see who the author is. Oh yeah, I had to read this because I took Dr. Weinkauf's class for my graduate degree. So I took his course. I've had him on the channel multiple times. In fact, I interviewed him on this very book, I believe. But I had his course on the Crusades for my graduate degree with Christendom, and he assigned this book, which I thought was really interesting. Glory of the Crusades by Steve Weidenkampf. Yeah, he was he had a really interesting course there. Okay, I think I grabbed everything. I think I grabbed all the super stickers, super chats. Thank y'all for that. I'll go ahead and in the stream here, got plenty more content coming your way. And I had a show from earlier. If you didn't see it already, go to my live videos and check out the previous show I did from Pope Leo XIV from earlier today. That one was a big one that I don't want to slip under the radar. Y'all need to see it. Okay. That's going to do it. See y'all tomorrow. God bless.